Submitting your podcast to Google Podcasts used to be a little confusing, to say the least, but Google just released their Google Podcasts Manager tool, an online dashboard that makes submitting your podcast to Google Podcasts and viewing listener statistics via the Google device ecosystem much, much easier. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to submit your podcast to Google Podcasts using Google Podcasts Manager. Hey, I'm Mark Asquith, CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media. We are a podcast technology company that makes Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast hosting platform. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to submit your podcast to Google Podcasts using their Podcasts Manager platform. It will allow you to submit your show into Google's podcast ecosystem so that people can listen using Google Podcasts on their devices, and it will give you listener statistics and analytics on how your show is consumed using the Google platforms. Google actually has made this really, really easy. Submitting your show to Google Podcasts has actually never been easier. So here I am inside my podcast hosting platform. I'm using Captivate.fm right now. And you'll see that I've got a very basic sample show set up. It is just an example show for demonstration purposes. So obviously your show would be far more comprehensive insofar as the show summary in the long description, for example. And of course, I've made sure that in my RSS feed, I've published at least one episode, which in this instance is my trailer. So all I need to do is grab my feed URL, my podcast RSS feed, just click copy feed URL at the top here in the Captivate podcast hosting platform. And then I open up Google Podcasts Manager, and you'll see a link to this in the description and pinned to the top of the comments within this video. So if I open Google Podcasts Manager, all I need to do is very simply paste my RSS feed in that I copied from Captivate. I then click Next Step. Google will then preview my RSS feed for me, which you can see right here. It's actually quite a nice looking little interface, and you can see I've got that one episode right here. Now, this is a brand new podcast, so we're not expecting much else in here. Next, I just make sure to verify the ownership. So Google Podcast Manager is going to say, look, I'm just going to send an email through to the email address that you set in your podcast hosting platform, and I just want you to grab a code from that email and pop it in to Google Podcast Manager. Now, it's very important that if I skip back to my hosting platform here, this is this author email, okay? So this author email right here needs to, of course, be the correct email that you have access to. But of course, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the other podcast directories use this as well. It's the public email within your RSS feed. So skipping back to Google Podcast Manager, I just hit submit. Having received the verification code from Google Podcasts to my RSS feed registered email, I can simply pop the code into the relevant area on Google Podcast Manager, and ownership will be verified, and very importantly, the show will be submitted to Google's podcast index. From here, all I need to do is click Get Started, and I will be taken to Google Podcast Manager's very simple but actually quite intuitive dashboard for analytics. Now, of course, this is a brand new show, so there aren't any plays available. There aren't any minutes played available to me. And the show is not yet fully indexed by Google Podcasts because it is brand new. But if I switch over to another show, Spark of Rebellion, you will see that some data is starting to be tracked. So Google Podcast Manager is much easier than any other version of managing a podcast through Google. It's certainly a massive step forward for podcasters when it comes to working with Google with regards to podcasts, and it's something that you absolutely should be submitting your podcast to.